Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gregg, and I'm a financial mediator and business valuation expert in St. Louis. And today I'm speaking with Randy Kessler. We're going behind the headlines, basically talking about some celebrity divorce truths. Now, what you should know about Randy is not only is he an esteemed professor, which I think is pretty fascinating, but also he has been involved in celebrity divorces for quite a long time. I think he's kind of the go-to for some of the Real Housewives. Specifically, he was actually on the show Real Housewives of Atlanta. So, and he's based in Atlanta, owns a very large family law firm. And I thought it would be interesting to talk to him today about some of the differences between our regular divorces and celebrity divorces. But welcome, Randy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How you doing, Melissa?
I'm doing good. So, you and I actually met quite a long time ago, and little known fact, you were my first podcast guest. So that's kind of exciting. I know you didn't know that, but and that was whenever we were doing Zoom trials. So we've come a long way, but today was a topic about celebrity divorces. And I was kind of like, Randy, I don't do a lot of celebrity divorces. So I need to know more about what is the difference. Do what?
Neither do I. If you think comparison, right? We got 20 lawyers, so maybe 10% of our cases are famous, maybe 20 at the most, but it's the one that you hear about, though, of course.
Yeah, and we have like Hollywood divorces. We have, you do a lot more maybe sports, dealing with sports professionals as well. But also we have like this new influencers, right? So people that are probably coming into wealth in the middle of a marriage. And if they both started with nothing and they came into the marriage and now became famous, like even online for their own personality, things like that, like, are we looking at a lot of prenups to start with? Are we fighting prenups? Because I've never seen a prenup that we haven't fought in court first, right?
I don't know. A lot of times, they come to you when it's a fight, right? Most prenups, if it's a well done prenup and normal, reasonable, cooperative people, they say if the prenup's going to be enforced, why are we going to spend a lot of money on lawyers? I mean, that is the point of a prenup, is to sort of say, I'd rather pay you now than pay you an enormous fee later to fight the divorce. So a good prenup does solve a lot of problems. But yes, um, negotiations of prenups are interesting, especially like you said, with these new influencers who may be a one-hit wonder, right? They may have one shot at it. And again, as we talked earlier before we went on air, is that athletes in particular have a 3-year window, maybe a 5-year window. So they've got to earn that money and save it forever. Same thing with an influencer. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. They could be canceled. They could say something that throws them off, and all of a sudden their career is gone. And the $1 million they made is all they're going to have for the rest of their lives, which is probably not as much as the average American is going to make over the course of their earning career. So, prenups are really, really sort of before the marriage. Before the divorce, there's going to be marriage. Before the marriage, there's often a prenup in a celebrity case. And maybe that's the first difference, that celebrities are more likely to have prenups than others. And I think that's not just because they're celebrities, not just because they're wealthy, but because celebrities and athletes, and I use the terms interchangeably, they often have a posse, right? They have people that are surrounding them. They surround themselves with good people. And what's the first thing that a manager or a business manager or a CPA or a lawyer or a good friend is going to tell somebody who's famous when they're getting married? They're going to say, look, I know you love him or her. You should think about a prenup. That's the first way to try to protect. So the words are in their ears. They probably think about it because they have people surrounding them, supporting them, protecting them more than you or me do.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess doing divorce for 25 plus years, and I know that you've probably been doing it for even longer, I would almost tell you it doesn't matter what you have, you should have a prenup because there's so much fighting about money in divorce. But typically, we're dealing with multimillionaires, billionaires that have their wealth from like business operations and things like that, that you're seeing heavy estate planning, right? So there's always like they're not going to let their kids get married without a prenup because of the family holdings. Now, what you're talking about when we're talking about influencers or, you know, like sort of celebrities, even sports related, is that they have an entire team around them. So, like, they have people managing their money, they have people that, multiple lawyers already involved. And some of this is public, some of it is not public. Something that's public recently is a sports person who was getting married. And, my husband was telling me about this, so I don't even remember their name, but they were getting married, and all of a sudden, after they go on their bachelorette party or bachelor party, everything's falling apart. And they're like, it's not because of the prenup that anybody wanted to sign. But if somebody has like a contract of like $200 million, I'm just wondering, like what would a typical prenup say, or at what point does it become unconscionable to be like, okay, I'm going to keep my 200 million and you get $1 million when we break up? Like, does it matter what the terms are of the prenup?
Yes, but that's a long intro. There's a lot there to unpack with all you said, because you started this question with, I think everybody should get a prenup, right? And I want to caveat that. I want to tweak that and say, I'm not sure that I think everyone should get a prenup, but I think everyone should explore a prenup, right? At least have the discussion, think about it, because sometimes, and this is where our world gets topsy-turvy, sometimes you can have a prenuptial agreement that leaves you worse off than if you didn't have a prenuptial agreement. We have people that say, I love him or her so much, I want to guarantee he or she has this much if we get divorced. And it turns out to be more than they would get if there was a divorce. So, the first question is, should you have one? But I think you're half right. They should explore it. Not sure it's always right, because somebody's going to come out better with a prenup and somebody's going to come out worse. So if you're going to come out worse with a prenup, then maybe you shouldn't have one. So that's the first question. And knowledge is power. So, like you said, all these rich folks have estate planning people, they have lawyers, they have family members. They're trying to protect them. Knowledge is power. Learn. I mean, getting married is a big deal, right? It's not just signing a piece of paper. It's not just standing under on the altar. It's a lifelong commitment. And in America, a lot of laws attached to you once you're married. A lot of benefits, right? Tax benefits, the ability to go into the hospital, march in the hospital, and see your spouse. And if you're not married to that person, then they won't let you in. So there are a lot of things that change when you get married. So why not think about it? Not just from a prenup point of view, but from a whole emotional, romantic, social, family, childbearing, all sorts of questions that come up before you get married. So those things apply to everybody, but to celebrities maybe a little bit more, because they have even more. They have a lot more concerns. Sometimes they're taking care of 15 family members, and then maybe those 15 family members don't want them to get married because it means less money for the family members. Are the family members giving them advice that's good for the professional, for the celebrity, or is the family member saying, if I let him or her give away too much money, there's less for me and my family to borrow or be given. So there's so many different issues for celebrities than there are for non-celebrities, non-famous people. But I think your question ended with influencers, and influencers is a weird thing, right? Influencers could be a fly-by-night thing. It could be a long-term thing. It could be, there's Oprah Winfrey, who's been an influencer her whole life. And then there's somebody you tell me about, a makeup artist that I haven't even heard of, that probably just became an influencer, and I don't know if they're going to last forever or if they're going to last 10 minutes. So it's the people that haven't proven long-term success that I worry more about, right? And again, I go back to athletes. The average lifespan in the NFL is 2.5 years, 3 years. The average NFL player plays 3 years. That means half of them play less. And if you think about Tom Brady and Drew Brees, who played 20 years, 10, 15 years, that means a lot of people have to play 1 year or less to balance it out to the average of 3 years. So if you're only going to make money once, or you're going to make it in a year or two, you deserve to preserve that, in my opinion. And you deserve to have that spread out over years and protect you, so that when your body aches and your body fails because of all the hard work you did as a kid and as a young guy or young woman, then you have that. So there are a whole bunch of different issues. And that really is the point, I think, of the podcast, right? What's different between celebrities, athletes, than the average person? The average person, the average American, is going to earn a little bit more money each year. Some may be entrepreneurs that may go up and down, but their lifespan of earnings will go until they're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. The lifespan of entertainers, and especially of athletes, very few after their career in the NFL or NBA go out and make a bunch of money, although it's changing now. This is unique. I don't know if you care about it, but I'm going to tell you about it. I've been doing this a long time. NFL athletes at the top of their game and NBA athletes used to make $1 million a year, which is a lot of money, but it's not what we call FU money. It's not money where you can just throw it away. You got to save it. Now, some of these athletes are making so much money that if they just put it in the bank at a reasonable rate of return, they can have a $500,000, $1 million a year income just on the proceeds of what they earn in the league. And if they're safe with it, then maybe they can protect it. But still, the average person, the average athlete that makes $300,000 per year, $500,000 per year, and then they don't make any more, they should want to preserve that because they worked hard for it, and it's not repetitive, consistent, ongoing future earnings, which is what separates them from the normal or typical client we represent.
Well, and we have dealt with some professional sports wives. And I think that, one of the issues specifically in the NFL, and they, some of these wives are on listservs and talking about it, is some domestic violence issues. And, traditionally the court doesn't always care about infidelity or, a lot of domestic issues. Are you seeing that matters when we're talking about money, right?
Yeah, well, first thing I want to tell you is you may be surprised to hear this, but we do represent a lot of NFL guys in domestic violence situations. But we've actually had a few recently where it is the woman who has been the violent actor and the one that's been put in jail. And a lot of times they feel like, I've got to lash out at him. He's strong. He's big. They're never going to, and you feel a little bit more safer punching a guy that's 6'8" because you're not really going to hurt him, but it's still domestic violence. So let's set the record straight. It's not always the stigmatized, bad boy NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball player. But yes, it does come up a lot, and it does happen more than often. I don't know if it happens more with athletes than in the average world, but there's a spotlight on it because the press loves to talk about it. The person we all admire and revere actually pushed his spouse or her spouse. And so, yes, it does happen, and it does hurt. But I think the court will punish and penalize people for doing that. But I think the real damage is in the public eye because a lot of these folks now are not making their money playing football forever. They play it, they get their name, and then they parlay that into becoming an influencer, like you talked about. And if you cannot have a good, sterling reputation, your influencing ability is going to evaporate. Nobody wants to follow or admire somebody who is a spouse beater or spousal abuser. So that just has its natural consequence in the world. But yes, I think judges also will penalize that. And certainly, like you have, we've represented folks that have been saddled with that. You got to keep that out of the public eye, not just to keep it away from a judge who's going to punish them, but again, more importantly, in a celebrity world, which is what we're talking about, to keep it out of the public. Once the public gets hold of it, then their future earnings tank. I mean, that's their future ability to make money with the name they built by playing sports or singing or rapping or acting or whatever. That's what you got to preserve, their reputation, their ability to attract followers and fans.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're talking about brand deals, endorsements, and the famous or the influencer who's getting divorced is like a makeup artist, Michaela. But a lot of these people are, like you said, have their normal job. They could be an actor or they could be a sports player, but they're doing these brand deals and endorsements. And where that intersects with valuation, interestingly enough, is like personal goodwill. So at what point, if I'm the influencer and my face, my likeness is what is creating this, at what point do we start to intersect that's personal goodwill? And in some states, not all, but in some states, that's a separate item, like that's a separate asset, if you will. Have you seen that be discussed in celebrity divorces?
Sure. I mean, the hard part is quantifying it. And thank goodness we have good forensic accountants that can help tell us and the judge how much of their net worth is based on goodwill and how much of the value of their business especially if their business is them, their business is their ability to attract fans and followers. Goodwill is huge. The hard part is, did they build that goodwill? Did they, during the marriage, was it marital effort? Did they go out and go to parties and go to events and use their equipment and their podcasting ability and their machinery and their cameras that was all purchased during the marriage to build their image versus their image itself? It's sort of like you could separate them into two people. If one was the persona and the personality, and the other was the person who took them to the places and made sure that they, made comments and that they woke up in time and put on their makeup and created a script and reached out to people to be on shows with them and the PR person that got them booked on the Tonight Show. But a lot of times it's all mixed together, and that's why it's above my pay grade, and I hire somebody like Melissa Gregg to figure out which part of it is just pure goodwill, which part of it is marital effort that is marital property to be divided by the court.
Well, and I'll give you an example, because I may or may not be going to trial next week on a case, which, again, this is going to air after the case, so no worries. But it was actually like a YouTube channel and a YouTube influencer. And again, my thought was that it's two different things, because once you shoot this, right, if it's a podcast or if it's an influencer, like the YouTube channel itself has value. And the moment that you make the videos and they're sitting there, they have that, like the person could die in some capacity and those videos would still be making money, still be garnishing, and these are somewhat educational or things that are evergreen, right? Which we understand that a little bit more. But my thought was, some of the past is not attached to the person and some of the future is. And so we have kind of an interesting parlay that I don't think there's a lot of valuation people that are getting involved with these nuances of these big, big brand deals, big endorsements, because there is risk. We've seen people like in the public eye go from having a huge brand deal to it vanishing, right? And if they had been paid out, are making payments on divorce, which maybe that's where we see it more often, is in the alimony and child support payments. Is that what we're seeing more of what's paid out in celebrity divorces as opposed to a percentage? A brand deal is like in the future, and traditionally we wouldn't look at the value of things in the future. We would look at what the value is today. Like, where does that come into play, or do you deal with any of those things?
If it's up to me, I don't like percentages. I like finite amounts, so that when I'm the divorce lawyer, and again, I think about a prenuptial agreement as what happens when this person gets a divorce and they come to see me as a divorce lawyer and they show me the document. What would I like that document to say to make my life easier and to make their life easier? And if it says they pay their spouse $100,000, that's easy. If it says they pay their spouse 20% of the value of the podcast that they've done for the last 3 years, now I need you again, Melissa, and I've got to figure out what is the value and what is the percentage and going future. So it's easier for me if it's a flat number. On the other hand, it may not be fair, right? Right now, today, as we negotiate our prenup between you and me, for instance, $100,000 sounds like a lot of money. But maybe that's nothing compared to how much money I make in 3 years. Or maybe I'm broke in 3 years and it's too much money for me. So there's that tension between doing what's fair and doing what's easy. So I don't mind percentages, but I like them to be easily calculable. And I don't like it going into the future beyond the marriage. You look at the bank accounts, you look at what's been earned, what's been received at the time of divorce or the time of filing, and then you divide that percentage-wise. That I'm okay with. But percentages of ongoing projects, that's hard. But doesn't mean we haven't settled divorce cases by saying, husband says the business is worth nothing, wife says it's worth $10 million. So they agree that if he ever sells it, she gets 10%. That kind of stuff is fair, right? They go along for the ride together. They're both rooting for the success of the former spouse. But other than that, something really simplistic, percentages really make it harder, and they're costlier, and is, like you said, creates a lot of risk, because who knows what percentage is the right amount? Who knows if the business is going to be worth anything? And if you're saying, instead of taking cash now, I'll take the ride and I'll take 10% of what you get in the future. It could be 10% of nothing. It's I'm just not a huge gambler, so.
Well, and I always encourage people to value whatever they have at the onset of a prenup so that you're not kind of trying to figure out what the difference is. But the other thing that I've seen in more celebrity prenups is going to be like, if you make it through 5 years in this marriage, then you get this. Do you think, or 10 years or whatever the term is, do you think that that sets people up for failure? Or do you think like, because somebody's like, because I've also seen a lot of divorces where they literally make it to that threshold and then there's the trigger for divorce.
That's what Britney Spears did, right? She was paying whatever it was, $100,000 for each year of the marriage. So she apparently filed right before the third anniversary or something like that. I may have gotten the numbers and the dates wrong, but that's a way to hedge your bets a little bit, because it's true. If you and I are going to get married, how much should you get if we get divorced? If I have a lot of money and you don't, you should probably get a lot more if we're married a lot longer. So how do you quantify that? And it's just a really hard decision. But yeah, the problem is, if I know that on our anniversary, every time we have an anniversary, I owe you an extra $100,000, then every year as we get close to the anniversary, I'm thinking, are we really going to make it another year? Because if I'm going to file, I might as well file before the anniversary. And I don't like putting those thoughts in people's heads. I don't like giving them the motivation to think about, should I file for divorce? But on the other hand, it limits risk, and it rewards longevity and consistency and stability and sticking with somebody. So, if I'm a jerk to you and you stick with me through it, then you should get more money. And if you decide to divorce me, you get less. You decide to stick with me, you get more. Sounds inherently fair, but I haven't seen it all. But every time I think there's a proclamation that this will always be true, there's some curve or something comes out of the blue that makes me think, wow, I didn't think about that. I didn't predict that. So I'm a fan of predictability. You will get $500,000 if we're married 5 years, $1 million if we're married 10 years. And then I try to put in other safeguards, preconditioned on me having more than $2 million at the time I owe you $1 million, or preconditioned on you getting only that much as long as I have less than 10 million. But if I have more than 10 million, then you get an extra bit. You can start working in formulas that safeguard to some degree, but nothing's perfect.
Yeah. And one thing, because again, I think about these things way too often. I need to get like some hobbies, but in the day and age of like us recording this, right? I don't understand why people wouldn't enter into agreements more in a video fashion. So like the two of us decide we're going to sign a prenup. Why wouldn't we start to like record it? And I know that this has been a protective measure in prenups in the past, but like, why wouldn't we go into this and and almost read it into like, do you understand that this is what you're entering into? And you're recording it. I'm of sound mind, sound body. I am entering into this agreement. Don't you think that video would carry more weight than just like signing something on a piece of paper that could still be interpreted as like, well, I didn't know what I have clients right now that are like, I didn't know what I was signing. We were at the rehearsal dinner, right? Like I was already had a few drinks. I'm like literally telling you some actual stories, just not saying the names, but like I had a few drinks. Was I even capable of signing this? And I'm thinking, okay, if you had done it weeks or months in advance, had people sit down with a video and in a, like all of these protective measures, don't you think that you could enter that video as evidence and say, you were of sound mind. We did it a month in advance. Like there are protections that could be in place so that we don't have these legal, interpretations that are happening at the time of divorce, right?
Yeah. Yes. We do that all the time. I try to video it. Some people don't do it. Some, and you ask why. Some people, it just doesn't feel right. They don't want to document it. Some people, especially celebrities, entertainers, don't want video that could get out there and somehow get leaked and they're not looking their best. But yeah, if we can video it, it's really, I get upset at some of the laws about signatures on prenuptial agreements. When we talk about it's got to be signed with this formality. In some states like Georgia, 2 witnesses, a notary. Um, I think that's good for wills when the person that signed it isn't there to say, yes, I signed it. But if you're in a prenuptial agreement dispute and both sides say, I signed it, then why should it matter who witnessed it, right? If they're agreeing they signed it, it should be enforced. So it's only for that unique occasion that somebody says, I didn't sign it, or I wasn't of right mind, like you said. And in that sense, you're absolutely right. A prenuptial agreement video, and we, again, a lot of high profile folks that I feel like they're afraid I'm filming it so that I can, show it to everybody and show it to my family, which is not the case. It gets locked in my computer. The reason that we do a little video is so that if somebody comes up with your defense, which is, I didn't know what I was signing. I was just, having fun. It was sort of, we were just playing a game. But then when they see the video that says, everybody has seen this document multiple times, everybody has talked to their lawyer about it, everybody is happy with it, everybody's pleased with it, no questions whatsoever. You want to get this thing signed, no questions. We go through those. And then you're right, because a video is worth 1,000 words. If a judge is confronted with, well, I didn't know what I was signing, and then they see the video where everyone's smiling and looking normal and saying, yes, I want to sign this so badly because I want to get married and I want to be done with this. All right, ma'am, even if you didn't understand it, you had the chance. And Mr. Kessler even filmed you and gave you the opportunity and said, do you want to back out of this? Would you like this to be signed? And you sort of shut him down saying, would you stop already? I want to sign this. I've already told you I want to sign it. My lawyer's already told you it's okay. Then that skips over that question. But the did I sign it issue, I don't see that as much. Was I in my right mind? It's a hard one, but yeah, safety is better than, the ounce of prevention is better than the pound of cure. So yes, we do videotape them if we can. But again, some people say, I'm not doing that. You're not going to videotape me. We say, fine, we don't need to. But,
I guess I didn't realize how many cases I have that are disconcerting about prenups, because I do have another case where the one of the spouses entered in with like $40 million, right? Old, like second marriage, third marriage kind of thing. And they can't find the prenup. Like they can't find the signed version of the prenup. They have a copy of something. And this is a situation where this person kind of let their spouse be the fiduciary, let them take control of some of the money, and they literally transferred the majority and commingled the separate assets themselves, right? Even changed beneficiary, like all of this stuff, and they were just blissfully unaware, thought that they were married happily, but it had started like from almost day one over the course of time. Does it matter if we can't find the signed one? Like, is that going to be a big deal?
it's a problem if somebody disputes it. If they both say this is the document we signed, then you're okay. But
Right.
the person who doesn't come off as, on the good side financially may very well say that's not the document signed. Judges would prefer it be signed. It's harder for us, but if it's not signed, we can still, ultimately, we're not saying, Your Honor, here's the prenuptial agreement, just check it off and say it's done. What we do is we prepare another settlement document saying, here are the terms, and we incorporate the prenuptial agreement terms. We may even attach it, but that new document is based on the prenup. So if the prenup is unsigned, but everybody says it's what we agreed to, or even if you don't have it, if they're willing to concede that this is what we wanted to do, that's fine. But yeah, it's a problem if you can't find a prenup. And lawyers, I don't think, are required to keep prenups forever. The bar rules are pretty much, you keep it for a reasonable time. Some states it's 90 days, 30 days, 6 years. Taxes, IRS wants you to keep stuff for 7 years, not lawyers, but people. What if you married 30 years? What if there was no internet? It's not on my hard drive because I didn't have a hard drive because there was no such thing as a hard drive 30 years ago.
What if the lawyer's dead now?
Yeah. What if there was
Right.
a fire? What if what if
Yeah.
the lawyer was barred? Yeah.
Okay, one kind of topic then, and we'll probably tie this up a little bit, is that we both like, and I got some ideas to talk to you about. But like, as we're going into some of these, higher profile divorces, and you've even created a space in your location to have private judging. And what that is actually having somebody come in and trying the case, and we've called it a lot of different, there's some terms that are kind of out of favor at this point. So I won't mention them, but like this private judging or, sort of like arbitration, mediation, combo, do you think that that's where we're going to progress so that we are not having this as a public record? Because in my area, if we have judges or lawyers or famous people get divorced, their cases sort of get sealed in some capacity so that it's not actually public record or their initials, so you can't find it as easily. But for really high profile cases, like where do you see the future? Is it private judging? Is it, is it mediation? Is it arbitrate? Like, where do you kind of see the future of this going?
Well, you have 14 hours. You gave me a lot of questions there. There's a lot to cover. There's private judging, there's mediation, there's arbitration, there's sealing, there's using initials.
I know.
So the bottom line is that we have a lot in our toolbox that we can do to keep public figures out of the public, right? And there are a lot of ways we can do it. One way is we can just draft everything. Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, for instance, you heard about their divorce once they were divorced. You didn't really hear that they're going to get divorced. So they've been working on that, I'm sure. No guarantees, but I'm sure more than a week, probably more than a year or two, to get all their ducks in a row and document everything. And that's how we like to do it with big cases, where it is all solved and settled. So by the time the public hears they're divorced, there's a nice joint statement. We want to keep this private. We appreciate everyone allowing us our privacy. We are divorced, or we will be divorced within a week. So that's the best way to do it, to keep privacy. But next best thing, Georgia, for instance, allows you to mediate and arbitrate everything. We call it private judging because we usually have a private judge, and we pay them. We built a courtroom in our office, and we have the judge come in, and people are paying them a few $100s an hour to listen and to say, you need to talk, and you've got some unique situations. I don't want the public walking in here, and I don't want the bailiff whispering to their friend. We do it in our office, or we do it by Zoom. That's a new way to do it. Mediation is in every case almost, celebrity, non-celebrity. But as far as if you have to file it, but you want to keep it private, there's always that debate. We had a case where the other side used initials, and their case got thrown out because you got to identify the person. The public has a right to know. There's a big tension. You remember the Fannie Willis, Nathan Wade. When Nathan Wade got divorced, that case was sealed, and the judge, took a little bit of heat for sealing it because the public has a right to know what's going on in the Nathan Wade divorce. But Nathan Wade also has a competing interest in keeping his life private. So there's a balance there. The best way to keep it sealed is to not file anything and to say, I trust you. We're going to keep the agreement in the lawyer's office, with the small risk that if something goes wrong or somebody doesn't file it, that the judge may not later enforce it because it wasn't in the court record. We put all the right language in there, and they do this a lot in California, that everyone's going to abide by this agreement that's not being filed with the court. But it's not really been tested that I know of, and somebody has not come back and said, well, I don't want to follow it. Because it's sort of a hard position to say, I signed it, I agreed to it, but because they didn't file it, I don't want you to enforce it, Judge. The issue isn't whether it was filed. The issue is, did you agree to it? But again, is it really a court order if the court didn't sign the actual document or wasn't attached to the order the court signed? So there are a lot of moving parts. A lot of times what we do is just pre-divide things. Let's go ahead and move title into your name, move title into his name, and then agree in the divorce that everyone keeps what's in their own names. That way you don't have to say she gets the car or she gets the beach property. You just say she gets what's in her name and he gets what's in his name, as long as we're very sure that we've moved the right things into the right names. And that's where good CPAs come into play and help.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I would like to see more of is mediators and people that have a financial background, because a lot of times we're seeing these individuals still be lawyers or former judges. And so I'll leave you with an idea that I really love, but I really want to be the next Judge Judy. And so I'm like, what would happen if you actually had like a financial person be like the maybe not the arbitrator, but
we're going to butt heads because, and you got to protect your profession. I protect my profession. And
yeah.
The reason it doesn't work, in my opinion, is because the decision is not a financial decision. It's a decision based on what the law requires. So I think there's got to be a hybrid where maybe there's a legal judge and an accounting judge, um, or there's a neutral, the court's private forensic accountant to advise on the financial issues. But ultimately the judge has to say, I'm going to divide this according to the law, not according to the math. They need the math, so it's a balance there. But for mediators, sure, because sometimes it's a complicated math thing and not a complicated legal thing, especially if it's in a state where it's 50-50 automatically, like California and Tennessee or Texas, where it's a community property state. Um, but for Judge Judy, for TV shows, you'd be phenomenal for a lot of reasons, not just because of you get it and you're mathematically inclined. But as far as for legal determination, I don't want anybody to say Melissa Gregg didn't understand the legal basis for my argument and make it subject to appeal. Even if you did understand it, it comes across better if the person has a law degree. So I think maybe a joint session, or you as the court's own neutral expert, not representing either party, but representing nothing but the truth, might help them figure out the best way to resolve it. And of course, you know what a judge would do in that situation because you've been in that situation. The judge is going to say, hey, Melissa, what do I do? Right? And you're going to lay it out and say, here's the best solution financially for everybody.
Well, and I was just thinking, if a couple signed a binding agreement and they said, we're going to agree that whatever happens in this, area, they would agree to, and you did have, legal, but you also had the financial and you had all of these pieces. Now, I'm going to say something a little bit more instigative then. Like, what do you think it's going to take? Because the reality is we're all interpreting laws on every different state differently. So what would it take for us to have a universal or uniform divorce code that would cover all states? Like, do you think that it would ever be possible?
Not in a million years. I mean, it's such a personal thing, right? I mean, some states believe that fault is really important because if you cheat and you have Bible Belt areas, not even every state, sometimes every county and every city. And, Georgia is like two states. There's Metro Atlanta, and you look at the political map, right? There's Atlanta, and then there's the rest of Georgia. And then there's cost of living. How do you know what the right amount of child support should be? Well, if you're living in New York City, you need a lot more child support than if you're living in, Macon, Georgia. So it's really hard to have universal state laws. People and religion infiltrates, and then there are people that say, I want to keep people from getting divorced, so I want to instill a waiting period. And there are people like me that say, when you put a waiting period in, you're making people get divorced. And people say, what? So yeah, because if someone hires me and says, what do I need to do to get a divorce? I say, well, you've got to be separated for a year before you can file for divorce. And she said, okay, then I got to move out today to get it started. Versus Georgia's law, which says, once you get a divorce, once you agree on everything, you can be divorced in 30 days. And she says, well, I'm not sure I'm there yet. I can keep working on the marriage. And when I decide I want a divorce, if it's quick, then I can do it quick. So I'm not in a hurry to hire you, Mr. Kessler, and file. So, these things are different across state lines, different costs of living, different values. It's one thing that makes the United States great is that we have these different regions and different areas. We have some general common values, but we don't have to all be the same. We don't have to all treat each other the same. We have different nuances in the law. There are different penalties for different crimes in different states. Just some people value certain acts differently in the South and the North and the West and the Midwest and the Mideast. And, Mideast is a whole other story, right? How about next we'll do a universal divorce code for the whole world? How about that?
Yeah, I know. I just wish life were a little bit simpler sometimes, but I agree with you. It's probably not in our career lifetime that would happen.
It's a nice dream to have, and it's a nice
Yeah.
thought. It would
Yeah.
be easy.
Okay, so to wrap it up, I think one of the biggest differences that I realized when I was doing much higher net worth, whether they're famous or billionaire divorces, is that a lot of these divorces take place behind closed doors with a team of professionals, and your people are talking to my people, and it's getting done in less confrontation with the couple. Would you say that that is kind of true, or are there any other kind of closing things that you would say are the differences or things maybe people wouldn't know?
Well, my biggest closing comment would be people are people, And we see it all: celebrity, non-celebrity, rich, poor, famous, non-famous, white, black, gay, not gay. So we see it all. So there's no one uniform rule. Wealthier people, successful people, usually stay wealthy by solving their own problems and not letting lawyers solve them. So yes, the general answer is people, celebrities, even non-celebrities that have money, are usually smarter about it. But sometimes it takes two, and you don't have two. Somebody wants a divorce, and the other side doesn't, and they say, "I'm just not going to cooperate." Not because I don't want to, not because I want more money, but if I cooperate and make this process smooth, you get to go do your own thing and go find somebody else to be happy with, and I'm stuck here trying to pick up the pieces. So I'm going to fight you as long as I can. It's just a human nature kind of thing. But if both sides are mature and sophisticated and recognize that a divorce is going to happen whether they want it or not, and if they can morph into and transition into this being a business discussion, not an emotional, relationship discussion, then yes, that can happen. Usually does happen. And I would think that celebrities and successful people are more inclined to see the big picture and to try to put that first and get it done that way. They're preserving their career, they're preserving their reputation. There are a lot of people out there that say, we're still going to get along, we're going to co-parent, we're going to be happy as spouses, and they hate each other. But you know what? For their persona, and I think they're doing a favor not just to their family and to their kids, they're doing a favor to the world, saying that even if you hate each other, you can publicly have a good face and put a good face on and have thick skin, and that does help. You control how you react to things. So if you're a role model, be a good role model.
I think that's good advice for anyone. I think going through divorce is that, at the end of the day, your kids are, I've seen a lot online where the kids go and get the transcripts from the divorce and they really then know what happened and things like that. So, I think that if you can get a little bit healed in the process and realize that you might have to co-parent, you may have had some good years with the person, but for you in particular, I think you have been very central in a lot of high profile divorces over time. Very well known sports people, very well known athletes and famous people. But, you also do normal divorces. You have a whole firm of people that does, maybe high profile, high dollar divorces. And, I've brought you into cases because I like your personality. I like how you are able to convey, and talk about high dollar things. But this is how people can reach out to you if you want to tell a little bit about your firm, and I'll run the ways that people can reach out to you. Because you have really grown an amazing empire, and I think kudos to you. You're also very much on court TV, and everybody calls you when there's a major divorce thing happening. I know you've talked about a lot of famous divorces, but why would people kind of reach out to your firm?
Well, thank you, Melissa. First of all, I want to tell you the first thing that I want to tell you is my favorite sentence from a potential client is, Mr. Kessler, I'm not one of your famous rich clients. That's humbling, and my reaction is always the same, which is good. You're one of our normal, everyday. That's our bread and butter. That's what we do. We represent normal people. You hear about the celebrities, and because those are the ones in the press, and those are the ones that everyone wants to talk about. But most of our cases, we have 19 lawyers. Of the 19 lawyers, maybe 20% of our whole firm's work are high profile or well known people. Maybe more, maybe less. We're also licensed in Georgia. Every now and then we do cases in other states because we'll do a good job for a ball player in Georgia, plays for the Hawks or a local team, and then gets traded to another team and has family issues there and says, "We come in and help me because I like you." So we will do cases in other states with co-counsel. But generally speaking, we're Georgia lawyers. Again, because I chair the ABA family law section, I'm connected. I know a lot of lawyers, and I'm happy to give people the names of folks that are really good in, Seattle or Washington or Chicago, and I get calls all the time for that. So I don't need to make the money. I need to make people get good representation. But our firm, I've been lucky enough to find a passion in what I do. I meet good people. I meet people that are going through a hard time, and I develop a bond with them, and I try to stay in touch with them. And I see them down the road, maybe 3 years down the road, maybe at a the ball game, or maybe at the grocery store, or maybe in a TV studio, and we had a moment because I helped them when they were at their worst, and so I feel good about that. I know if I do my job well, I'm helping them, and that feels good. But happy to
Yeah.
answer questions, happy to entertain calls. We do charge for a consultation, of course, because we'd be busy all day long giving out free advice. But if you call us and we can't help you, we'll find somebody who can, whether it's in your state or in your area, even if it's not family law. You need the greatest personal injury lawyer in the world, call us and I'll find you somebody who can do that for you, or criminal law or whatever. I just like
Yeah.
helping. It's probably how I've got that reputation, talking about it, being approachable and being willing to help our clients. That's why we're lawyers, to serve the average citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to bring you in so that, because other attorneys around the country, you have a lot of connections. I think we met a decade ago because you spoke at a conference. And so you do a lot of speaking in general and speaking engagement. So I think people can reach out to you, but we've given them all your information. I appreciate you, obviously. And I look forward to interviewing you like once a year, because I just stay,
Good.
reaching out, and you're always so gracious. So I appreciate it.
You make me think about stuff that I don't think about every day. So it's good. It helps me too. So I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Melissa.